Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lab. In this lab we're going to create our first RDS instance and we're going to create a little web server that's going to connect to this RDS instance. So you will need to log into the console for this part of the course. Okay, so I've logged into the console and what I want to do first is go over to EC2 and we're going to go in and create my web server. So I'm going to go ahead and hit running instances. If you still have your running instance left over from the Route 53 section of the course, go in and delete it. Also delete your load balancer because load balancers do cost you money if you leave them to run for too long, and a lot of people do forget this, so go in and delete the load balancer. So once you've done that, go ahead and launch a new instance. We're going to use the Amazon Linux AMI and we're going to use a T1 micro and hit next. And we're going to leave everything as standard, except if we go down to advanced details, we're going to put in a bootstrap script here. Now this is one that's available in the resources section of the course. So if you look over to the right hand side of your screen, you should be able to download this. If you don't have it for any particular reason, just go to a new tab and go to this address. So basically it's s3-eu-west-1.amazon.com/acloudguru/rds.shell. And once that's downloaded, you should see a script that looks exactly like this. And so what it is, just cut and paste this into your browser, and we'll put it down as our bootstrap script. So what this actually does, if you have a look at the script, I'll just switch back over to Text Wrangler. And so it just makes it a little bit easy to see because it shows you the different things. So this is our shebang and then the path to our interpreter, and this is going to interpret every command that we do after this and run it at root level. So what we're doing is we're doing yum install httpd, so we're installing Apache, we're installing PHP, and we're installing PHP MySQL, and then we're running an update and just updating our operating system for any security patches. Then we're turning Apache on so that if the EC2 instance restarts, the Apache service will fire up again, and then we are starting the Apache service. And then what we're doing here is we're just echoing out a little command. So this is some PHP code, you don't need to know how to program to do this course, but this is basically just writing a little file that says PHP info, and it's storing that file in the var www.html index.php directory or file, and then we're changing the directory, and then we're going to do and go and get another PHP file which I've got in my S3 bucket. So that's all this batch script is going to do. So if we come back over to our come back over here and we'll go ahead and hit next, and then we want to just keep everything default, hit next. We'll call this web1. Go ahead and hit next, and then just select an existing security group. I'm going to use my WebDMZ security group, and then we go ahead and hit review and hit launch, and then just use your standard existing key pair, and then it will now be launching. And what I'm going to do, instead of pausing the video while we wait for this to happen, I'm going to go over and I'm going to create a new security group. So if we click on security groups, we're going to create a security group, and we're going to call it my RDS security group. Security group, and again I'm going to put that in as my description. It's going to go into my default VPC, and we're not going to add any rules here just yet. We're just going to go ahead and create this security group, and we're going to use this for our RDS instance. Now the last thing we want to do is go across over and create our RDS instance. So I've never created an RDS instance before on this account, so we will get a splash screen. Just going to close this down here, and so what we want to do now is go to get started now, and we can see straight away it's asking us to select our engine. So at the time of recording there's 6 RDS database technologies available. When I first created this course just over a year ago, there was only 4, so they've added on Aurora and they've added on MariaDB. So what we want to do is we want to use MySQL. And it says, do you plan to use this database for production purposes? It's going to be dev and test essentially, so we're going to use MySQL. And then essentially we want to keep everything the same. We'll go down to our DB instance class, so we want to use a T2 micro. Multi-AZ we want to say no, and we can leave everything else as default. And then down here, I'm just going to enter in my DB instance identifier. So I'm going to keep it all the same just for consistency. So we're going to do a Cloud Guru aCloudGuru is the username, the master password's aCloudGuru, and the password, again, confirming, is aCloudGuru. So everything else we leave as default. Go ahead and hit next, and you'll notice that it says up here your current selection is eligible for the free tier, so you just want to double check that. If you do multi-AZ, and we'll explain what that is in a future lecture, it will then say that it's no longer eligible, disqualifies the instance from being eligible for the free tier. So right now we will just say no for multi-AZ, and go ahead and hit next. And now we need to configure the networking. So we're going to use our default VPC. Do we want this to be publicly accessible? Well, I'm going to say no for now. I'm just going to change it to no. And then in terms of the availability zone, we'll just say no preference. And our VPC security groups, we're going to use the RDS security group that we created earlier. And then the database name, again, it's going to be aCloudGuru. It just makes it really nice and easy. And you can say whether or not you want to enable encryption, but actually this selected engine or DB class does not support storage encryption. So do know that going into the exam, some RDS instances can be encrypted at rest, and we'll cover that off in another lecture as to which ones. And then if we go down here, we've got our backup window, so it's going to do backups, and the backup retention is going to be 7 days, and we'll just leave everything else as basically as the default values, and go ahead and hit launch. Now, launching an RDS instance can take some time. It can take 5-10 minutes, so you have to be a little bit patient. Go in and hit view here, you'll see that it's creating this RDS instance. So while we wait for this to launch, we're going to go back across and go over here, and we'll go back to EC2. And what I want to see in EC2 is I want to know whether or not our bootstrap script has run successfully. So the way we can test this is two ways. First thing we want to do is we want to get the IP address. We're going to put this up into a new tab, and I'm going to go and just tab it in, and straight away it's loading the the index.php page. So this is that little script that we created in here, and it's actually running PHP info. So if you see this, it's installed PHP successfully. It's able to execute PHP files. And if you actually do a search for MySQL, you also see that MySQL has been installed as well. So the other thing we can do now is we can go / and then it's connect.php. And if you see up here, it says unable to connect to MySQL. So right now it is calling a connection string. It's trying to connect to an RDS database, but it can't. So the objective of this lecture is to basically be able to connect to it. And if I actually open up connect.php, this is essentially what it is doing. So it's a little PHP script. It's got our username, our password, our host name, which has been left blank, our database name, which is aCloudGuru, and then it's got a PHP connection string. And what we're actually seeing right now is this error message. So it's saying unable to connect to MySQL. And the reason for that is even though we've set up the username, password, database name as aCloudGuru, we haven't entered in a host name. And in any case, right now, if we go back over to the RDS console, we'll see that it probably still hasn't been provisioned. Come in here and go to my DB instances. It's still creating. So what I need to do now is I need to wait for this to be created. But while I am waiting, I can fire up my terminal window because we are going to need to go into that connect.php file to edit it and add in our connection string. So I'm just going to open up my terminal window now. Okay, so I have my terminal window open, and I'm just going to go and SSH ec2-user at, and then your public IP address, then -i, and then the name of your key pair. So mine's called myec2key.pem, and hit enter. And there we go, we've logged in, and I'm just going to raise my privileges to root by typing sudo su. I'm going to clear the screen. We're going to go cd var www html. So we're changing the directory over to our HTML. We're going to go ls, and you can see two files in there. One is the connect.php and one is the index.php. So I'm going to go in and nano my connect.php. Now in here you can see that exact script that we had open earlier. So we've got our username, we've got a password, we've got our host name, we've got our database name. What we need to do is just update the host name to point to our RDS instance. So let's go over to our terminal. back to our console, and I'm just going to go ahead and refresh this. Now it's still backing up my RDS instance, but I should be able to go in and get my endpoint, which you can see here. So there's the endpoint, and that is going to become our address. So if we just cut and paste this, and then go back to our terminal window, and if you paste it in there, and I'm just going to go and fix this little space, and there we go. And so all we need to do now is go Control X, and it says save modified buffer, hit yes and hit enter. And then we need to come back to the console, and if we go back to that screen where we tried to connect, we're going to refresh it again, and we're still not going to be able to connect. And the reason for that is we've got the RDS instances inside one security group, and our web server is inside another security group. So what we need to do now is enable our web server security group to talk to our RDS instance using the RDS security group. So it sounds complex, but it's really, really simple. So all we need to do now is click on security groups, and we can actually have to go back into either EC2 or VPC. We'll go in using the EC2. We go ahead over to security groups. Okay, so we're going to go in and edit this security group, the My RDS security group. So we'll go in and hit edit. And what we want to do is we want to allow MySQL Aurora. So that's port 3306. And we're going to use a custom IP. And if you click in here and if you just type in the letter S, it's going to prompt you with all your different S security groups. So mine's SG4DE8AE29. So that's my web DMZ security group. So you want to select the security group that works for your web server. And so we go ahead and hit select. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And what we've now done is we've allowed this inbound rule for MySQL to communicate, or for our web server to communicate to our RDS security group. So if we go up here and if we just refresh the screen, you can see it says connected to MySQL using username aCloudGuru, password aCloudGuru, and then that's the host name, and then it's connected to the database. So we have successfully connected to our RDS instance. So great work, guys. It does seem quite simple, but you know, what you've done is actually quite really cool. Essentially what you've done now is you've created a web server, you've installed PHP on that web server as well as Apache, and then you've downloaded a script that connects your web server to your RDS instance, and if you have allowed that connection through your security groups. So in the next lecture, we're going to look at multiple availability zones using RDS, and we're going to look at read replicas and the differences between them. So it will be another lab. So if you've got the time, feel free to join me in the next lecture. Thank you.